You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth!
Hey everybody, it's Brian Burns. Welcome to this episode of the Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling podcast. I'm going to do a solo one today, mostly because it's the mid-year. Here we are, I'm recording this at the last day of June on a Saturday. And I've had a lot of reviews with people. And I kind of came up with a format that's working for me and working for some of the people I work with. I've got a couple of face-to-face clients that I still work with. And what I used to do is focus on what they learned and the mistakes that they made and how to not make them again. And what I found was that was off-putting. It was people didn't want to talk about that or they couldn't remember anything. And what I did is I came up with a different formula because that was too direct, too brutal. Hence the brutal truth. So what I wanted to do was kind of share what's working for me and share with you the mistakes that I made in the first half, and then share the format of what's working with me and my clients, as well as share an update on the courses and the results that people are getting. Because, here we are, start the conversation, get the meetings, been out for now 6 months, and people are getting traction with it. A few people have gone as far as the outsourcing stage where they're just getting their calendars full of meetings. And that brings up one mistake I made. I filled up my calendar a little too tight this half and didn't take into consideration a couple of things. And I had a family tragedy that happened the first half that kind of all of a sudden you find out if you really book yourself solid, it becomes hard to unravel if something comes up that becomes even more important and more urgent. And so here's what I did wrong with these reviews, is that I started with the negative. So what I did is last night I met with a CEO and somebody I've known for years. We had worked together. And instead of starting with, what did you learn this quarter, which usually turned into nothing, and I'd have to pull it out of him because I knew what was going wrong, right? Because we had met probably twice a month. And, I saw, and I've known the person for a long time, and you just see this pattern over and over again. And what I wanted to do was basically prevent those things because that is the learning cycle. And we all think that we learn from these things, and we all make mistakes. I make a ton of them. Everybody makes a ton of them. And sales is a prevention profession. Nobody asked me a single question about prevention, ever, since I've ever been doing it. And I've never heard anyone else ask anyone else a prevention-based question. Everybody asks, how do you get around this once it gets started, once it goes south, once it's in the ditch? And the problem is that is super hard, and I talk about that a lot. So the prevention is the things that we have to proactively do. And that is what we have to build into our daily systems. So what I started to do was, let's talk about the accomplishments first. Started off on a positive thing. What did you accomplish, as far as what your objectives were, what your goals were, and what did work? And once you get people rolling, then all of a sudden they're open-minded. And then you can say, well, and instead of asking about mistakes, I asked about, how would have you used your time better? Because time is the thing that we have control over, and that kind of sets our priorities. Nobody wants to say, I wasted a lot of, or I chased the wrong account, or I fumbled this meeting, I didn't get the next meeting set up. I misjudged this person lied to me, which is all going to happen. And what we need to do is put asset tests basically into each of these stages in our sales process to either prevent it or recognize it for what it is so we know immediately, not the last day of the quarter. Because yesterday was Friday and, a lot of people were frazzled, and I'm sure you're kind of recovering. I'm kind of out of the quarterly requirement. I kind of go into more of a system. I do have quarterly things, but the things that go wrong for me are always prevention things. All of them can be prevented. And the problem is that we don't make that a priority. So when I asked, how did you use your time? What always seems to come up is people use their time for the things that are fun, that they like to do, that they're good at, that are more busy, distraction-based activities. And that in sales is too much. I mean, especially in the first half where you get the company, new comp plan, new territories, kickoff meetings, quarterly reviews, new tools, new approaches, all of this stuff. All of a sudden it's thrown at you all at once. You start the first month or two a little disgruntled, adjusting to the new territory, maybe new products. There's a lot of adjustment in the first half of the year. And I hope you're well ahead of your number, because the next 2 months are typically, July and August are slow, to say the least. If not slow, kind of hiccupy, because people in the decision chain aren't there at the same time. People are going on vacation. The next 2 weeks in the U.S. is the 2 biggest weeks of vacation ever. And I hope you're going to take time to enjoy yourself. So first, what I did is talk about accomplishments. Talk about the positive thing. That's where you build the person up. You build yourself up. List out your accomplishments, as many as you want. Feel good about yourself. And then focus on, how did you use your time? Pull up your calendar. Whatever you use, either online or your notebook. Go back as far as January and start flipping through it and start looking at how you spent your time and rate it. A, it was revenue generating for the half. B, it was going to be revenue generating for the second half. Or C, it was a waste of time. It's not going to happen. People call that no decision. Doesn't matter. You can't take no decision to the bank and say, I'd like to cash this commission check for no decision. And this is what happens. Because basically what I've mostly seen, even with myself, is that if you don't prioritize and time block your time, meaning on Tuesday you do this and you do the most important thing first. Why? Because once you get it done, you feel fantastic. Even if it's just sending an email, even if it's just making a call, even if it's just giving somebody an update on something, you're putting it off for a reason. And this is what I run into, what everybody runs into. If you put it down as a cadence, as a pattern, as a habit, you will naturally do it. Instead of it waiting until it's too late and then the deal drives off in a ditch or it loses momentum and people are like, oh, why are we doing this again? When's this coming due? So really look at your time, because that's all we have. We can't make more time. We can work harder, which is going to affect our health. And other people don't work on the weekend, so calling them isn't going to work. Emailing them, you get locked in the spam list. So we really have to maximize that Monday through Friday and really look at what works for us. And once you start time blocking, and what you'll find is, Monday morning's spent typically on meetings. Friday afternoon is spent typically people trying to scoot out early and not really focusing. I never had customer calls or meetings on a Friday afternoon, nor did I travel on Fridays, because everybody travels on Fridays. So what you try and do is do it a little off than everyone else so that you're not in the herd and you're doing it smarter and you're anticipating. Because imagine if you had all your deals expire either a week or 2 weeks earlier than the end of June. Because I bet you were all waiting around trying to get those orders done yesterday. Yesterday being the end of June. Now, that is all preventable. And what happens is when you go with the herd, you get stuck in the herd. And all of a sudden you can't get out of it. And you're going to lunch at noon. And I don't know if you've ever gone to lunch at noon, where you go to a restaurant or a cafe or trying to get a sandwich, whatever you get for lunch. All of a sudden, the lines are out the door. It's rushing around. The service stinks because people are overwhelmed. But if you go at 11:30, quarter of 12, you get a seat. You get great service. You're out of there before everybody else is out of there. Just adjusting your time around people. Same thing with rush hour. Same thing with contacting people. If you think ahead, you can start to see this prevention model working. Now, how do you prevent all these things going wrong is you stay in constant contact with your prospects, your customers, and your manager, and you talk about the hard thing that everyone puts off. And if you do that hard thing, the first thing every day, all of a sudden you feel this ton of weight lifted off of you. Now, this is not news. It's not news to me. It's not news to you, probably. But how many of us do it? It is, we don't do it. We put it off, and then we slip it to the next day and the next day, and all of a sudden it's the next week, and it's gone. So here's the thing. Look at your time. I go through and I look at my time, and some of the things that I made the mistake of is I typically overbook myself and overstress myself, and all of a sudden here I am with not getting the really important things done. And I tend to go more on quantity than quality. So I'm trying to prevent that. And certainly with the podcast, I've got to literally overbook myself by 25% to 30%, because you got to be you'd be surprised, all these people that either forget about, even they get reminders. I remind them the day before. There's an automatic reminder. You get technology issues. You got internet issues. You've got travel issues. And, some people look at it as a great opportunity. Some people look at it, they're doing me a favor. All of these things play into it. And about 25% either flake, totally forget about it, have to reschedule, or have technology issues. And I get it. I've had technology issues, and very rarely, because I've once I learn, I try and put it into my I do put it into my checklist to prevent it from happening. So I've learned to overbook myself by 25%. Now, not once has everybody shown up. So that's kind of a lesson. And so the good part is that I've got lots of interviews for you. The bad part of it is I've learned that I've got to find a system to prepare for the interview very fast. So I have a standard list of preparation questions, but I tend to get frustrated and emotional when somebody doesn't show up, as I put a good half hour to an hour preparing, and all of a sudden they don't show up. So I lost that hour that I could have been used on something else. So my lesson is to have a standard preparation process and prepare one day before, because I have a 24-hour cancellation policy, and some people adhere to it, some people don't. And that's just my world. And I'm sure you have that in your world. People don't show up for meetings, calls, no matter how much preparation and confirmation you do. The next thing is emotion versus logic. And we cannot, we can't help this, but we naturally are very emotional creatures. And my perfect example of this is every time I pose a question on LinkedIn, almost, I'd say near zero answer the question. It's kind of funny, because if you say, what's your favorite color, red, white, or blue? People will answer, I don't have a favorite color, or I like number 16, or this is a stupid question. Nobody says red, white, or blue, or purple. People just, they have a knee-jerk reaction to the question. Same thing with some of the videos I put out. They don't either watch or listen to the video. They just have a reaction to it. And sometimes it's like so emotional that you're like, where did you get this? did you watch it? Did you listen to it? Because I try and post thought-provoking or funny things that try and like lighten people's day up or get them thinking differently. And very rarely does people think. They just naturally just react. Now, I do it too. And I try and control it. And that's something what we have to control in sales because we have to be nice to prospects. We can't lose it. We can't lose it with our manager. And to nowadays, it's easy to lose it because a lot of times we're anonymous on social or we never seen or talked to that person. And we're just not doing the well thought out thing. So that is another thing. I think the priorities thing, if you always put number one as number one, that, I've been trying to do it. Honestly, I've failed at it. I'm going to start blocking out certain days of the week, even tighter, coming up with the top priority, hitting that every day. I do have a morning routine now that's actually written and checklisted. And, before it was a routine, but it's been modified. A lot has changed in my life. So the mornings have become super powerful. And I'm trying to get the, things like the Sales Questions podcast ramped up so I can answer your questions in quicker and in more detail instead of, just when I have a chance. Because I find that those are more engaging and they're short form and people like a little bit of quick answers to their questions and their career choices. That's why I started the Career Advice podcast because most of the questions I was getting weren't really sales-specific questions. And the ones that I did get were all repair questions. So I'm trying to get everybody to really think of it as a preparation profession. But we're not preparation creatures. We're reactive creatures. That's the way our brains have evolved, and that's why we're emotional creatures. And the priorities, we tend to only do the priorities that are sorted off of survival instead of preparation. So we're much better socialized and evolved to be hunters than farmers. But from a career strategy standpoint, it's much more like a farming type of capability. Certainly our day and how we use our time. We do have to have the hunting mentality for the focus, and that's where the prioritization. And the key to prioritization is prioritization, meaning that the number one thing has to do with your real goal. It's revenue generating activity. It's prevention oriented. If you accomplish it, you will hit your goal. You will feel better about yourself. And if you delay it, it's going to affect you. Now, these 2 months that are coming up are great months for preparation. Why? Because you're going to have a lot of quiet time, meaning your manager's going to go away, you're going to go away, your customers are going to go away, and you should have a time off. And there's going to be a lot of inexpensive labor out there. The craziness that's going on with the economy is that all of these, young people, high school, college people that have the summer off, summer jobs don't pay very well, and it's taxed, and you have to drive there, and you have to listen to a boss, and you're not really learning anything valuable. Flipping a burger, making a latte, watching people swim, or yelling at kids at camp. There's skills, there's grit, and all that, and I love that. But what if those people could be applied to building pipeline for you, getting onto the internet, which they're fantastic at, getting them to do some of the research, to start the conversation, get the meeting type of functions, and you could pay them, equal or greater amount, which is still a fraction, hopefully, of what you're earning, so that you could be freed up to talk to people, to actually have the conversations, get the meeting, instead of the research, the data, the cleansing, the prioritization, the qualification, all the digging that is very time-consuming and distractive. So I'm trying to help you get away from that type of stuff, because today in sales, that's taking up way too much. And that's something that's changed. There's too much administration. There's too much research to really do the job right. And it'd be great if you could say, these are the typical things I'd like to know about someone and someone's company before I speak to them, before I do outreach, so that you can have a great conversation with them. And can you go and do this research for me? And so I would highly recommend you doing that. I've used Upwork. You can just use your network, throw out the feelers. I got to believe that in your network, there's plenty of people that could get 5, 10, 20 hours a week of doing this for you. They would learn something, a marketable skill. They could work from home on the internet, and they would love it. So, and then after you make the list of the things that you could have done better with your time, who did you focus it on? What priorities did you use? Where did you have too much emotion and not enough logic? Ask yourself those questions. Instead of looking at it as mistakes, look at it as how you could have used those resources and that focus better. I find it much more useful, because what I found with people is they have meetings with people that are chit-chat meetings that are, what we used to call Barney meetings. I love you, you love me, but never goes anywhere. And some of that is necessary and good, but it's not prime time Monday through Friday good. It's, breakfast good and happy hour good and weekend good, but not prime time good. And anything that requires travel is just a time killer. And people say, well, I can talk on the phone, I can listen to a podcast while I travel. Yeah, sure you can. But I always found, travel to be a killer. That's why I went 100% digital, because the travel just ate up my time, my energy, and my patience, where I could be online interacting with people like this in a one-to-many, especially, even if it's one-to-one, it's just so much more effective use of my time. And prioritization based off of your objectives for the rest of the year. Even if you're behind, it doesn't matter. I mean, you've got 6 months to make up for it. Look at the courses if you want help doing that. I'd love to help you. You look at the partners that I have in Pipedrive and Nudge. Look at the resources like Gong and Discover.org. See where you are as far as your skills and developing them, because you're the asset. You're the machine. Don't think like an employee. Those days are gone. They are gone. And I listen to a lot of people getting into sales, and they get way too comfortable with the employee mentality. And the problem with that is that if you're not thinking like a salespreneur, you're not building the asset. Because I've talked and interviewed so many salespeople, and I ask them, tell me about a deal. And it was all reactive, giving people quotes, following up with them, answering questions. But that's order taking. And I don't mean to demean it. I just mean that marketability, that value in the market is, just above entry level. What people want is somebody who can make things happen, that can be a rainmaker, that can be the difference that makes the difference. And that's what I'm teaching here. And that's the value of a salesperson. The employee salesperson is a cog in the wheel. And I think companies are using, entry-level salespeople, sales development reps as that. And in my course, I try and teach you to get out of that role as soon as possible. 1, because it's a grind. 2, because the income is very limited. 3 is that you're treated more like an administrator than you are a salesperson, even though you're doing what is a very hard job, a very difficult job, especially when it's cold only. When it's inbound, that's more, customer service, and it's good and it's great skills, but its marketability isn't that much. If I was to interview somebody who handled inbound, I would see how well they asked questions, how much they dug into my real desires, how curious they were. because curiosity is coming up as one of those characteristics of a great salesperson. And I've got a couple of interviews coming up on that. I really wanted to put this out now so that you could use this July 4th week as a time to reflect and set your goals, your priorities, and really learn from last quarter. And people say, I bet, less than 10% of you will write this down. And I asked people, or I put a video out on Friday, and only one person, actually Greg, who helped me out on something, he put out what he learned. And I looked at it and I go, yeah, I bet he repeated this over and over again. I looked at the stuff I learned. Is this the first time I noticed this? No, this is my whole life has been like this. And and the CEO that I met on Friday night, you think that was the first time he took too many coffee meetings with just helping other people out? No, he's been doing it his whole life, and so have I. And it's not, and I don't point it out to degrade anybody. I point it out that if you don't write it down, if you don't acknowledge it and don't take action to change it, you're going to do it for the next 6 months. And you're going to sit down and you go, well, I could have just talked to that person. Why didn't that person drive to my location? I'm helping them out. I'm basically doing all the contribution here. Why don't we just do it on the phone? And just like put that down, because if you don't write it down, guess what happens? You do it over again, because we're emotional creatures. And the things I did is as far as overbooking, which is the natural thing. And, maybe I'm going a little crazy now, but I've got, blocked out 3 months to get onto the podcasts. Now, is that too far? Might be, but I'm trying it. And of course, the flake rate goes up as you go out because people forget about it. People book, near holiday weekends and not thinking about it, because that people think about today really well and 3 months from now, not so well. So that's the key about writing it down. Now, I know 9 out of 10 of you aren't going to do it. But if you don't want to repeat it, if you really want to utilize that time, because everyone is going to fill up that time with stuff that does not matter. Your manager, how much time do they take? They're saying 30% on admin, which I remember, in sales, we spent less than 5, literally. Managers, you'd have a half-hour call maybe every other Monday, and there was a spreadsheet forecast that you'd update maybe once a week, and you just cut and paste the deals, and then it would roll up. It wasn't that way. All these tools are great and powerful, but they take time to learn, they take time to run, they take time to administrate. That's why I like simple stuff and automatic stuff like Nudge. And to give you an update, Nudge is coming out with a capability this week on companies that really looks good. And you get a free month with Brutal Truth coupon. And the course, you get a free access with the password Nudge, or the coupon code Nudge. So remember that. And in the course, I put the Brutal Truth coupon, so you get a whole month of the premium free with that. And you can use that same coupon code to try out Pipedrive. And Pipedrive is just on fire. They just raised $50 million, so it's not a low-end CRM anymore. It's a full-blown, powerful CRM with this, follow-up capability that they put in a cadence tracking functionality. I put a video of it up on my YouTube channel. Just search Brian Burns Sales Podcast. It'll come right up. So here's my takeaways. Start with what you accomplished. Number 2 is analyze your time, the people, the priorities, and separating out emotion from logic. Number 3 is build yourself up again. So it's build yourself up, tear yourself down, build yourself up again if you write it down. If you don't write it down, don't build yourself up again. You're hosed. You know? You're not hosed, but you're going to repeat the same thing. And look through this. Date it. Put it somewhere. And you don't, if you're really aggressive, do it with a partner. Do it with somebody who's in sales, a buddy, a manager, somebody that you have confidence in, somebody who's going to be sincere and honest with you. But by writing it down, you'll see it and you can look at it, whether it's online or paper, doesn't matter to me, but it will matter to you. And then build yourself up again. Reflect on what you accomplished. What are you going to do differently in the next 6 months? Really visualize it. Get that wall calendar. It was a game changer for me. Just go to Amazon, look for even, it's $30. And if you just look at the whole year all at once, you'll start to, and then block out times that aren't work times, whatever they are, holidays, weekends, trade shows, anytime that, company meetings. And what you'll find is time flies by. I mean, you remember January 1st? Does it seem like 6 months ago to you? It seems like yesterday. And it just flies by. Before we know it, we're going to be talking. It's going to be December 31st, and you're either going to crush it or be the victim of it. Prevent those things that you know are going to go wrong in the second half. I should do a podcast on telling you what's going to go wrong. Okay, you got next 2 months. You can't get emotional. I always used to get emotional during the summer going, oh, my business is dying. The economy has stopped. No, everyone's just on vacation. I appreciate you listening, me ramble through this. I want to let you know that the podcast, I've got tons of backlog of great guests. I've got to edit them up, do intros and outros and summations. I'm going to be dropping them as we go through the summer. If you know of somebody who'd be great guests, let me know. Getting a lot of requests to have more women on the show. I got a lot of women on the B2B Revenue Leadership podcast, and I've had Deb Calvert on. I've had several women. I'd love to have more diversity in both sales domains, ages, locations. I've had some European folks on that I've got in the backlog. And if you like to understand the leadership side, check out the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast, Sales Questions Podcast. If you like just short, to the point Q&A, email me your questions. I'll get to them as soon as I can. Also, the Career Advice Podcast, check that out. And also, I'm going to have a big bonus in July. I'm still trying to find the rules so I don't mislead anybody, because I know you're all on the treadmill or running or driving while you're listening to this and no one's writing anything down and everybody forgets what the rules are. But I want to teach you how to socially share on LinkedIn and how to get your posts to rank and how to help me. And in turn, I'm going to reward whoever's the best at it. So I'm going to think through the rules. So I encourage everybody, incentivize everybody, and reward everybody for doing it in a fair and somewhat equitable way. So look for that coming out in the next week or so. Make sure you're checking out the B2B revenue.com for all my free ebook and the courses. And feedback on the website. Somebody told me they didn't like the website. Just tell me what you'd like it to look like and what you don't like about it, other than what you feel. So I appreciate everybody listening. Have a great 4th, a great July. And if you're on vacation, enjoy this and catch up when you can. I'll see you soon. Check out the show notes for all the deals with my partners. I work pretty close with these folks because they have such great content and great products. They don't fit everybody. I get that. But at minimum, go to their website, get their ebooks, register to read their blogs if you want great sales content. What I'm going to try and do is take it and turn it into audio format and discussions. I've got a couple of great co-hosts that I'm working with, Derek and Chad. I've got Brian and one more guy coming up. If any of you are interested in being on the podcast to share your story, I've got some of the students coming out of the class that want to come on the podcast, like Ron Massey did, that are just crushing it with Start the Conversation, Get the Meeting, and getting away from that old world pitching cold calling, cold emailing, those we've hit it. I'm telling you, everyone is saying it. Last year, with all the automation, people have abused it to the point that people are no longer responding. Enough of me. Get on with your weekend, folks. Thanks for listening.